Paul began by writing that Paul, an apostle, not from man nor through man, but through Jesus Christ and God the Father, who raised him from the dead, and all the brethren who are with me. And in this opening paragraph, we see that from the very beginning, Paul acknowledged that even the gospel, the teaching of grace that he is sharing with the Galatian church and all other churches, it comes from God. So let's shift all the way to verse 6. Because after the customary greeting, Paul went straight into saying that I marvel that you are turning away so soon from him who called you in the grace of Christ into a different gospel. So it's clear that the grace of Christ is the true gospel, and anything else is a different gospel. And the grace of Christ is simply about undeserved, unmerited favor we receive from God through Jesus Christ who died on the cross. And it's by grace we have been saved through faith in Christ, not by our works. So that is the essence of the gospel. And Paul went on to say that, but I made known to you, brethren, that the gospel which was preached by me was not according to man. For I neither received it nor from man, nor was I taught it, but it came through the revelation of Jesus Christ. So it's similar to the opening paragraph where I say Paul was made an apostle, not from man nor through man, but through Jesus Christ and God the Father. Now he's also saying that the gospel of grace was not accorded or given by him through man or by man, but by the revelation of Jesus Christ. And then of course there will be some questions in the mind of people who read his epistle, will be thinking that okay, but who qualified Paul to write the gospel, or how can we believe that Paul received this revelation from Jesus Christ directly? Because according to the world standard, the pattern of the world is that when we want to teach or share a message, we usually credit to the institution of man. We will say, oh yes, I learned it from this university, I learned that in school, or I received it from this great master or guru or some human teacher. But Paul credited his gospel directly to Jesus Christ, whom his audience might not have seen with their eyes or encountered the way Paul has encountered. So Paul will need to qualify his statement, because anybody can claim that they have received it directly from some divine figures, or from Christ or from God. So therefore we must test all things, and Paul knew that. He even encouraged everyone in another epistles to test the spirit, test all things. So how can Paul build his credibility in preaching the gospel of grace? One is the testimony from those who have known him all their lives. So Paul was using that testimony as something solid, as an evidence to show that he can be trusted. Whatever he says about receiving the gospel of grace from Christ can be trusted. So verse 10 tells us that Paul wrote, for you have heard of my former conduct in Judaism, how I persecuted the church of God beyond measure and tried to destroy it. And I advanced in Judaism beyond many of my contemporaries in my own nations, being more exceedingly jealous for the tradition of my father. So Paul was not like a nobody. He was known, especially in Jerusalem. He was the Pharisee of Pharisees, Hebrews of Hebrews. So So those who were in the tradition of Judaism would have known Paul all the years, and they would also have seen how Paul has been persecuted the church before he met Christ personally. So Paul appealed to that testimony that, okay, people have seen what he used to be like and now what he is like, and that is a powerful testimony of how God has transformed his life, his mission, his mindset. And then the next verse is very telling. You see, Paul wrote, "But when it pleased God, who separated me or set me apart from my mother's womb and called me through his grace," there he emphasized the power of grace, undeserved favor, "to reveal his Son in me that I might preach him among the Gentiles, the non-Jews." So, if we were to read a writing from any other human being, they would have written like this: "Oh yes, I used to do this. I used to persecute the church. I did not know any better. And then one day I got a revelation. I got smart. I came to the conclusion. I realized, they will usually boast about, oh yeah, it's their intelligence. Oh yes, it's their efforts. Oh yes, they suddenly have a eureka moment." Like you usually read biography of eminent scientists and inventors. That's usually how they will credit themselves. Yeah, I got this. It's my intelligence. It's my power. But Paul wrote it differently. He said that it's not me, but it pleased God. So God is the one who initiates. He is the one who chose him. He knew him from before the foundation of the world, when he was in mother's womb, just like God knew Jeremiah the prophet when he was in mother's womb, and that goes the same for everybody else. So he emphasized that while Paul was still in his mother's womb, he was set apart, and then after he was born, Paul called him through his grace, not human effort. And the purpose is to reveal his Son in him. So again, we see that the glory goes to God through Christ. So it makes nothing. It nullifies man's glory. And also what follows is very crucial, is very interesting. Paul said after he received that calling, after the direct encounter with Jesus on the road to Damascus, Paul did not immediately consult with men or confer with men, and he actually he did not use the word man. He used the word flesh and blood. And this phrase flesh and blood is very interesting, because Jesus also used flesh and blood when he talked to Peter. When Peter confessed Christ as the Messiah, the living Christ, and Peter said, "Flesh and blood did not reveal this revelation to you, but my Father in heaven." So I would say that flesh and blood is referring to mortal men, mere mortals. And Paul also wrote in the book of Ephesians that we wrestle not against flesh and blood, but we wrestle against the principalities and power. So again, the phrase flesh and blood is significant. It's not just referring to humans, but it emphasizes that we are not dealing with mere mortals. So here Paul was saying that he did not immediately confer with flesh and blood, with mortals, after he had received the divine calling from Jesus during that encounter. And Paul also wrote that he did not go up to Jerusalem to those who were apostles before him, and these are referring to Peter, James, John, and the other apostles. So Paul went to Arabia, and then he returned to Damascus. I find this significant because Arabia is mainly a desert. So it seems to remind me, or it seems to imply that after he received the important calling, Paul knew the importance of the calling. He went to a desert. It mirrors Jesus, the beginning of Jesus' ministry. After he got baptized in River Jordan, he also was led into the wilderness, into the desert, and fasted 40 days, 40 nights. So could that be the experience of Paul? For 3 years, he went to Arabia, maybe in a desert. He went through some temptations, like what Jesus went through in the wilderness experience. And I would say that it probably is testing that prepared Paul for his ministry, because it's a very, very dangerous yet important mission for the rest of Paul's life. So after those 3 years in Arabia, and then he returned to Damascus, he went up to Jerusalem. Okay, so I might have misread what I shared with you earlier. He went to Arabia, but he did not specify how many days or how many years. So he said that he returned to Damascus, and 3 years in Damascus. So it's like X number of years in Arabia, and then another 3 years in Damascus. So this period of time is very, very important for Paul to prepare for his mission without conferring or consulting any human beings, or without interacting with flesh and blood. So it has been an ongoing, continual interaction and communion with God alone, with Christ alone. So imagine like living like a hermit, but the fact that Paul's teaching, as well as the other apostles' teaching, has made such a huge impact for the past 2,000 years, shows the enormity of their task and how it was, how they were prepared for these tasks. So it's probably no surprise that they had to spend a certain number of years in isolation, deliberately communing with God before they actually began their mission. So when Paul felt ready to begin his ministry, after 3 years in Damascus, he went up to Jerusalem to see Peter and remained with him 15 days. And Paul added that he saw none of the other apostles except James, the Lord's brother. I think this is significant because it's written more than once that there is a Jewish law or the principle that by the word of 2 or 3 witnesses, or by the mouth of 2 or 3 testimonies, every truth shall be established. So here Paul cited 2 witnesses, Peter and James. So minimum we must have 2 witnesses in order to establish the truth. And Paul cited 2 of the most reliable witnesses. Peter, because he has been selected by Christ personally to be the rock, the church upon which he will build. So Peter is one of the first builders of the church of Jesus Christ. And also Peter would have known or experienced grace, because Peter was forgiven by Christ after he denied Jesus 3 times before his crucifixion. So that might be the reason why Paul went to see Peter first, because Peter understood grace to some extent, and Peter is also one of the most well-known and trusted leaders of the early church. And secondly, James, because he's the Lord's brother, and who more trustworthy, except other than Peter, than James, who walked with Christ during his ministry, and who also wrote the epistles of James. So Paul has 2 very strong, reliable witnesses. And that's how he convinced the church of Galatians that, okay, this is the gospel of grace that I have been sharing with you, and it's so important that I marvel that you have turned away from it. And now I want you to know why it's so serious, because the gospel of grace that I share with you is not given by man. It's not taught in the university, or nor have I invented it. So I don't bring the credit for it, neither do any other human being, but I receive it directly from Christ. And how do you trust me when I say that I receive it directly from Christ? Look at my former conduct, look at my previous life, so to speak, before I transform into a new creation. And there are people among you who know me, because I have been a Pharisee, I have been very jealous for Judaism. People know me, people see my transformation. And third is, I have even, after my retreat, so to speak, in the wilderness, I went to see I went to see the Apostle Peter and the Apostle James. So you can ask them, they knew my interaction. So he has built a very strong foundation of why the Galatian church should trust him, to take confidence in his word, and to show that the gospel of grace is not any other teaching. It's not even a human teaching, but it's divine revelation that Paul received it from Christ. So finally, Paul wrote the last verse in chapter 1. Afterward, I went into the regions of Syria and Cilicia, and I was unknown by face to the churches of Judea who were in Christ. But they were hearing only, and this is very important, because they only heard this testimony about Paul. And what they heard is, he who formerly persecuted us, the church, now preaches the faith which he once tried to destroy. And to me, this is a powerful statement, because back in those days, in the 1st century AD, there were no social media, no recording, no videos. So he was unknown. They had not even seen him in the flesh. So no TV, no internet, no social media, and he wasn't there with them in the region of Syria and Cilicia. So the people could only go by what they hear, and what they hear that struck them most is this statement: Paul, who formerly persecuted the church, now preaches the faith which he once tried to destroy. So to me, that is God's way of doing things. Man's will be like, they try to convince, they try to persuade, they take master class, they go to training courses on how to persuade, how to market, how to convince. So they use methods, oratory, they go to Toastmaster class, how to present themselves, all the strategy and tactics. These are the world's ways, but God's ways are not our ways. God's way is, he transforms somebody, he accords somebody, and then he transforms that person from the inside out. And God tells them to do one thing and one thing only: to testify, to be a witness, to tell the world that this is once I was like this, now I am this. Once I was lost, now I'm found. So that's the amazing grace, when people can see that transformation, not just by our words, but the way we live our life. Therefore, people can take faith and confidence in what we share, based on the transformation that they have seen in our life. So we are not just preaching the gospel, we are living the gospel. We walk according to the faith we have received, and look at the result. The final word, the final line in Paul's first chapter of Galatians: and they glorified God in me. So that's the result when we share the gospel, when we testify to how God has transformed our life, how we have a personal encounter with Christ in our personal way, and the result will be God glorified. God get the glory. God was glorified in you, in me, in us, not in ourselves, not in any other people. So to God and for God be all the glory. And so I will say grace and peace to you as well. Thank you for listening.